Hey, dear members of the Soul Stories family. Today we will bring you a romantic love story, so let's get started. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any meaningful stories. Chapter 1. The Girl in the Heart of Winter. The cold wind howled in gusts through the narrow alley behind Old Bean Cafe, carrying the biting chill of a December night. Lena Gray pulled her thin coat tighter, hurrying across the thick layer of snow blanketing the ground. Her old shoes squeaked with every step as their rubber soles hit the ice. But she didn't mind. Her weekend night shift had just ended, and now all she wanted was to get back to her small apartment a few blocks away, curl up under a blanket with a cup of hot tea, a rare luxury she allowed herself after long days. Lena was 23, living alone, with no family or relatives. She had grown up in an orphanage, where dreams were trapped within gray, dreary walls. But she harbored a burning ambition to become a nurse, to heal the wounds she herself had once carried. To make that happen, she worked at the cafe, taking every shift she could, saving every spare penny in a tin box under her bed. Her wages were meager, but she didn't give up. Each night she told herself, just one more step, and I'll be closer. The snow fell heavier than usual, flakes swirling in the air, blanketing her vision in white. Lena shivered, her breath turning to white vapor in front of her. She had just turned into a familiar shortcut alley when she froze. A faint sound, like a soft groan, came from a dark corner. She tilted her head to listen. The wind? Or a trick of her exhausted mind? But then it came again, clearer, more desperate. Lena pulled a small flashlight from her coat pocket, its weak beam cutting through the gloom to reveal a figure curled up in the snow, slumped against a stained brick wall. A man. He wore an expensive black suit, now soaked and torn at the shoulder. His head was bowed, dark hair matted with melted snow. His right hand clutched his chest, where a child's wooden necklace dangled between fingers, pale from the cold. "Hey, mister," Lena called, her voice trembling in the wind. No response. She knelt down, placing a hand on his shoulder and shaking him gently. His body was ice cold, his lips purple, his breath as faint as a thread about to snap. She'd taken a first aid class at the community center. She knew if she did nothing, he'd die of hypothermia. Staying put wasn't an option. Her apartment was just a few hundred meters away, and she couldn't leave him in the snow like this. Gritting her teeth, Lena slipped her arms under his shoulders, hauling him up with all her strength. He was heavy, but she clenched her jaw and dragged him step by step through the snow. "Don't die on me," she muttered, her breath ragged. "I don't want to read about a dead guy in the alley tomorrow morning." The wind stung her face, but she didn't stop. After a few grueling minutes, she reached her apartment door. She shoved it open with her shoulder, her trembling hands fumbling with the lock. Inside was nearly as cold as outside, but at least there was an old fireplace in the corner. Lena pulled him in, laying him on the wooden floor near the hearth. Panting, she looked at him. His clothes were drenched. Leaving them on would be fatal. Taking a deep breath, she peeled off his suit jacket, then his shirt, pants, and polished leather shoes. A torn sleeve revealed a large scar running down his arm. Deep, jagged, like an old knife wound. She paused, startled, but there was no time to dwell on it. She rushed to grab a blanket from her bed, wrapping it tightly around him, then lit the fireplace. Smoke rose as warmth slowly spread through the room. Lena sat down, checking him again. He was still unconscious, but his breathing had steadied, his lips less blue. In his delirium, he mumbled something. She leaned closer, catching a faint word. "Eli." He repeated it. "Eli, don't go." Who was Eli? His child? His wife? She didn't know, but the pain in his voice tugged at her heart. She considered calling an ambulance, but her phone was dead, and the landline had been broken for ages. "Just tonight," she told herself. "I'll figure it out in the morning." She pulled a chair closer, keeping watch over him. Exhaustion hit her hard, her eyelids drooping, and she drifted off without realizing it. When dawn broke, weak sunlight filtered through the frosted window, and Lena jolted awake. She'd fallen asleep in the chair, her neck stiff. The man was gone. The blanket was neatly folded on the floor, the fireplace cold. All that remained was a small object among the folds, the wooden necklace. Lena picked it up, her fingers tracing its worn carvings. He'd left. No thank you, no trace. She stood, her legs numb, but a strange warmth filled her chest. She'd saved a life, whoever he was. Lena slipped the necklace into her coat pocket, a faint smile crossing her lips. Eli, huh? She murmured, then started her day, unaware that this encounter would change her life. Chapter 2. An Unexpected Reunion. Monday morning at Old Bean Cafe was busier than usual. The coffee grinder roared, and the scent of toasted bread mingled with freshly ground coffee filled the air. Lena Gray stood behind the counter, tying an apron around her waist, her hands swiftly wiping coffee stains off the wooden surface. The previous night lingered in her mind, the image of the unconscious man in the dark alley, the wooden necklace she'd picked up from her floor, and the name Eli he'd muttered in his delirium. She touched her pocket where the necklace rested, wondering if she should toss it out to forget the strange incident. The door chime snapped her out of her thoughts. She looked up, offering a habitual smile to the new customer. But that smile froze when she saw him. The man who stepped in wore a perfectly tailored gray suit, his black hair neatly combed, his sharp eyes scanning the room. He was tall, exuding authority without saying a word. Lena was stunned. The thin lips, the angular jaw. It was the man she'd saved last night, the one who'd vanished from her apartment without a thank you. You, Lena blurted, her voice faltering. Her hand gripped the rag tightly, her heart pounding. He approached the counter, his polished leather shoes tapping steadily on the wooden floor. When he stopped, just an arm's length away, Lena realized he wasn't just a stranger. She'd seen that face in newspapers, in business articles left behind by customers. Damian Vance, CEO of Vance Corp., one of the city's largest conglomerates. A man known for his cold demeanor and brilliance. Damian looked at her, his deep gaze devoid of emotion. "One espresso," he said, his voice low and firm. Lena nodded mechanically, turning to prepare it, but her mind was a mess. What was he doing here? Did he remember her? She tried to steady her hands as she set the coffee on the counter, the steam rising and blurring her view. Damian took a sip, set the cup down, and suddenly spoke. "You've seen me at my worst." His tone was calm, but it carried a weight that startled Lena. She looked up, meeting his eyes locked onto hers. "Are you going to pretend you're not responsible?" Lena blinked, hardly believing her ears. "Responsible?" she echoed, her voice rising in shock. "What do you mean? I saved you. I didn't hurt you." She crossed her arms, trying to appear resolute despite the panic swirling inside. Who did he think he was, making demands like that? Damian tilted his head, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "I'm not talking about saving me," he replied. "I'm saying I need you now. Agree to be my wife, in name only for just 6 months." He paused, his voice dropping, more serious. "I'd very much like your help, and in return, I'll help you achieve your dream." The words hit her like a shock wave. Lena laughed, but it came out dry and forced. "Are you kidding? A wife in name only? I didn't even know who you were until a few minutes ago." She stepped back, feeling like she'd stumbled into some bizarre game. Damian didn't smile. He tapped his fingers lightly on the counter, his gaze unwavering. "I need a legal wife to secure custody of my son, Eli. His mother is trying to take him from me. Just 6 months until the lawsuit ends. After that, you're free." He paused, his tone softening briefly. "I know you want to be a nurse. Tuition, scholarships, opportunities. I can give you all of it." Lena stood frozen, her hands trembling. "How do you know I want to be a nurse?" she asked, her voice fading. But Damian didn't answer directly. He just looked at her, his eyes piercing through every shield she'd built. "I've looked into you," he said. Before she could protest, he continued. "This is a deal. You help me keep Eli, and I help you reach your dream. No long-term strings attached." Lena felt suffocated. His words were cold, like a business transaction, but the promise of her dream made her waver. She shook her head, clenching her fists. "You think I'd marry a stranger just for money? I'm not your tool." She pulled the wooden necklace from her pocket and slammed it onto the counter. "Here, your stuff. I don't want it. I don't want any part of this. Damien glanced at the necklace, his fingers brushing its worn carvings. A flicker of emotion passed through his eyes but vanished quickly. He picked it up, slipped it into his suit pocket, and looked at her again. "Thank you," he said, his voice deeper. "But I'm not forcing you. Meet Eli first. See him, then decide. I believe you'll change your mind." He stood, buttoning his suit jacket, and slid a business card toward her. "My number's there. Call when you're ready." He turned and walked out, leaving the espresso nearly untouched and the card on the counter. The door chime rang as he left, leaving Lena standing still, her breath uneven. She stared at the card with Damien Vance and a phone number printed on it. The necklace was gone, but the name Eli echoed in her mind, like an irresistible pull. 6 months, not long, but enough to alter her life. His offer, tuition, scholarships, opportunities, knocked on the door of the dream she'd buried for so long. She clenched her fists, trying to shake off the wavering feeling rising within her. "I don't need him," she muttered, but her voice lacked conviction. Chapter 3. The Eyes of a Child. 3 days had passed since Damien Vance left Old Bean Cafe, leaving behind his business card and that bizarre proposal on the counter. Lena Gray tried to carry on as usual, wiping down the counter, brewing coffee, smiling at customers. But her mind couldn't shake the name Eli. 6 months as a wife in name only, tuition, scholarships, the chance to become a nurse. Damien's words echoed, hammering at the door of the dream she'd buried. She hated this wavering feeling. She didn't want to sell herself short, but every time she thought of letting the opportunity slip away, her chest grew heavy. On Thursday evening, Lena sat in the old armchair in her small apartment, Damien's card resting on the table in front of her. She picked it up, twirling it between her fingers, then sighed. "Just meet the kid," she muttered. "It doesn't mean I'm agreeing." She wasn't sure who she was convincing, Damien or herself, but she knew if she didn't go, she'd forever wonder what if. She texted the number on the card, her fingers trembling. "I'll meet Eli, just to meet him." The next morning, a sleek black car pulled up in front of the cafe just as Lena's morning shift ended. The driver, a middle-aged man in a uniform, stepped out and opened the back door. "Miss Gray, Mr. Vance is expecting you," he said, his tone polite but emotionless. Lena took a deep breath and climbed in, feeling like she was stepping into a world that wasn't hers. The car took her to an upscale neighborhood where towering villas hid behind lush green trees. They stopped in front of a large house with white walls and gleaming glass doors that sparkled in the sunlight. Damien stood at the entrance, still in his cold gray suit, but his gaze softened slightly when he saw her. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice low. "Eli's inside. I won't interfere. Feel free to be yourself with him." Lena nodded and crossed the threshold. Inside, the house was vast but sterile, more like a museum than a home. The marble floors gleamed, the walls bore a few abstract paintings, and there wasn't a trace of familial warmth. She heard tiny footsteps descending the stairs. A boy appeared, about 4 years old, with messy black hair falling over his forehead and big wary eyes. He clutched an old, worn teddy bear, its matted fur a shield against the world. "Hi there," Lena said gently, kneeling to meet him at eye level. "I'm Lena. You're Eli, right?" The boy didn't answer right away, just stared at her, his eyes glistening but distant. Lena smiled, trying not to let the silence unnerve her. "I heard you like teddy bears. What's his name?" Eli blinked, then mumbled, "He's Mr. Bear." His voice was tiny, as if afraid the sound might shatter in the air. Lena nodded and sat on the floor, ignoring the chill of the marble seeping through her pants. "Mr. Bear looks pretty strong. You take good care of him." Eli studied her for a moment, then slowly stepped closer, still hugging the bear tightly. He sat a few feet away, his small hands fiddling with the bear's ears. "Dad said you're a friend," he whispered. "But Dad doesn't have friends. He just has me." Lena felt a pang in her chest. She looked into the boy's eyes, clear yet burdened with a sadness no 4-year-old should carry. She saw herself in them, the lonely days at the orphanage, clutching a thin pillow to fend off the cold and the fear of abandonment. "I used to not have anyone either," she said, her voice soft like she was sharing a secret. But I learned that sometimes, all it takes is one friend to make things a little less bad. Eli tilted his head as if weighing her words. Then he asked, his voice trembling, Dad said my real mom left me, but a new mom won't leave me, right? The question stabbed at Lena's heart. She remembered the nights she'd cried silently in the orphanage, wondering why her own mother never came back. She remembered the hollow ache of unanswered questions. She took a deep breath, trying to keep her voice steady. I don't know what your real mom was like, she said, but if I were your new mom, I wouldn't leave you. The words slipped out before she could think, and she felt her eyes sting. Eli looked at her, then suddenly smiled. A small, shy smile, but the first crack in his guarded shell. Can you sing? He asked. The mom on TV always sings me to sleep. Lena nodded, though her throat tightened. She began to sing an old lullaby she'd heard at the orphanage, her voice shaky but warm. Sleep, sleep, the wind sings over the hills. Eli leaned his head against the bear, his eyes slowly closing. As the song ended, he murmured, half asleep, Mom Lena sings so nice. Lena froze, her heart skipping a beat. Mom Lena. The name from that tiny mouth tied an invisible thread around her, binding her to him. She sat still, watching Eli drift off on the floor, the bear still cradled in his arms. Damien stood at the doorway, silently observing, but she didn't notice. All she saw was the shadow of her own childhood in this boy, lonely, fragile, yet yearning for love. When Damien walked her to the car, Lena said nothing. He broke the silence. What did you think of him? She turned to him, her voice hoarse. I'll reconsider your offer. Damien nodded, asking no more. But as the car pulled away, Lena knew she couldn't turn her back on Eli. 6 months, a deal, but now it wasn't just about the money anymore. Chapter 4. Why me? Lena Gray stood before the towering glass doors of Damien Vance's office, her heart pounding in her chest. The Vance Corp building loomed high, gleaming under the midday sun, a symbol of power she never imagined stepping into. 2 days after meeting Eli, the shy boy with sparkling eyes and a worn teddy bear, Lena couldn't shake his image from her mind. His sleepy voice calling her Mom Lena echoed, pulling her from restless nights. She'd texted Damien that morning, a single curt line, I want to talk. She was ushered into a sprawling office on the top floor, where Damien sat behind an ebony desk, sunlight streaming through the window onto the black suit he wore. He stood as she entered, gesturing to the leather chair across from him. No smile, no small talk, just a slight nod, as if he'd known she'd come. Lena sat, her hands clenched on her lap. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her voice. I met Eli, she began, locking eyes with him. He's special, but I still don't understand. She paused, swallowing hard. Why me? Damien tilted his head, his gaze deep, as if weighing every word she spoke. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stood and walked to the window, looking down at the sprawling city below. You could have walked away that night, he finally said, his voice low and even. A stranger unconscious in an alley, soaked, nothing worth stealing. Most people would have stepped over me, or called the police and forgotten it. But you didn't. Lena frowned, unsure where he was going. I just did the right thing, she said, her tone firmer than she'd intended. Anyone would have. Damien turned back, his eyes sharp but not as cold as before. No, not anyone, he countered. You dragged me to your home, stripped off my wet clothes, warmed me by your fireplace, even though you had nothing but a tiny apartment and a long day's work behind you. You cared for me with a kindness and warmth I haven't seen in anyone in a long time. He paused, his voice lowering. Eli's a wounded child. His mother left him, and I'm not good enough to fill that void. I need your warmth for Eli. Lena's throat tightened. His words were sincere, but they carried a weight that unsettled her. She thought of Eli, how he clung to his teddy bear, how he smiled when she sang to him. She saw herself in him, the lonely days at the orphanage craving a warm embrace, but she still hesitated. You have money, she said, her voice hoarse. You could hire anyone, nannies, lawyers, someone better than me. Why a cafe girl with no money, no power, nothing? Damien stepped closer, sitting in the chair across from her, closing the distance between them for the first time. Because Eli doesn't need money, he said. He needs someone genuine. I saw that in you that night, and I saw it when you were with Eli. You're not fake. You didn't have to try to get him to open up. He looked straight into her eyes, his gaze no longer that of a cold CEO, but of a father pleading. I don't want anyone else. I want you. Lena lowered her head, her hands tightening. His words struck a deep part of her, the part that longed to be needed, to matter. But she didn't want to be swept into a world that wasn't hers. If I agree, she said slowly, there'll be conditions. This is just a deal for Eli. No meddling in each other's personal lives. After 6 months, I'm free. Deal? Damien nodded without hesitation. Deal. He stood, retrieving a stack of papers from his desk and sliding them toward her. This is the contract. Everything you need, terms, benefits, nursing scholarships, is in there. Read it and sign when you're ready. Lena stared at the documents, her heart racing. She knew signing would change her life. She thought of Eli, of his eyes when he called her Mom Lena. She thought of the nights at the orphanage, when no one came for her. For Eli, she murmured, then picked up the pen and signed her name on the page. Damien signed after her, his signature sharp like the man himself. That afternoon, Lena moved into Damien's villa. She brought a small suitcase, some clothes, an old medical book, and the tin box holding her savings. The vast, cold house with its marble floors and pristine white walls made her feel out of place. Damien led her to a private room on the second floor, its window overlooking a lush garden. This is your room, he said. Eli's down the hall. I'm downstairs. You have your space, as promised. Lena nodded, setting her suitcase on the floor. Thank you, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Damien looked at her for a moment as if he wanted to say more, but he only nodded and left. When the door closed, Lena sat on the bed, her breath uneven. She'd entered a deal, 6 months for Eli, for her dream. But thinking of the boy waiting somewhere in this house, she knew she couldn't turn back. That evening, she heard tiny footsteps outside her door. Eli stood there, clutching his teddy bear, his eyes lighting up when he saw her. You're really here? He asked, his voice a whisper. Lena smiled, kneeling to hug him. Really, she said, and for the first time, the cold house felt a little less empty. Chapter 5. Being the CEO's Wife. A week after signing the contract, Lena Gray had begun to settle into the rhythm of life in Damien Vance's villa. Each morning she woke early, sunlight streaming through the second-floor window onto the polished wooden floor. She no longer felt as out of place as she had on the first day, though the house still carried the chill of detachment. She decided to make it a home, not for herself or Damien, but for Eli, the 4-year-old boy who needed a place to belong. Lena started with the small things. Using her meager savings, she went to the market, buying fresh vegetables, chicken, and a few packets of baking mix. The villa's kitchen, with its stainless steel fridge and granite countertops, had once been a lifeless space, but now it became her domain. She made chicken sandwiches for Eli, fried crispy potatoes, and cooked steaming pots of soup. The aroma of food wafted through, stirring the house from its prolonged silence. Eli would often scamper down, clutching his teddy bear, peeking from the kitchen doorway. Are you making something yummy again? He'd ask, his eyes lighting up. French fries today, Lena said with a smile, handing him a piece. But you have to eat your soup first, okay? Eli nodded, climbing onto a chair, his short legs swinging. She didn't stop at cooking. She brought colored paper and pencils from the convenience store, sitting with Eli on the living room floor, teaching him to draw houses, suns, and trees. His scribbled drawings were taped to the walls, adding splashes of color to the stark white space. Damien remained a distant figure. He came home on time each evening, ate the portion Lena left in the microwave, then disappeared into his study. She didn't mind. That was their agreement. No meddling in each other's personal lives. But one evening, as Lena sat by Eli's bed, telling him a bedtime story, she sensed a presence at the door. Damien stood there, hands in his pockets, his eyes darkening as he listened to her tale of the hero in the shadows. He never abandons anyone, she said warmly. No matter how dark it gets, He always finds his way home. Eli giggled, hugging his bear tighter, his eyes sparkling under the nightlight. But Damien stepped in, his voice cutting through abruptly. "Don't glorify me." Lena turned, startled by his sharpness. He stood in the middle of the room, his hands clenched. "I'm not a hero. Don't fill his head with things that aren't true." Lena set the book down and stood to face him, her gaze unwavering. "I'm not glorifying you," she replied firmly. "I'm just telling the truth. You're here, doing everything to keep Eli. That's what I see." She wasn't sure why she said it, maybe because she realized he wasn't just a cold CEO, but a father trying in his own way. Damien opened his mouth to argue, but Eli piped up, his voice small but clear. "Mom tells good stories." The boy sat up in bed, looking at Lena with shining eyes. "Mom's my hero, right?" The word mom came out distinctly for the first time. Not sleepy, not vague. Lena froze, a wave of warmth flooding her chest. She knelt down, pulling him into a hug, whispering, "Yeah, Mom's here with you." Damien stood still, his hands dropping to his sides, his eyes flickering, surprised, moved. He turned and left the room without a word, but his steps were slower than usual, as if carrying something heavy. Lena sat back beside Eli, stroking his hair until he drifted off. She knew she wasn't just fulfilling a contract anymore. She was becoming part of this boy's life. And though Damien wouldn't admit it, she sensed he was changing too, even if just a little. Chapter 6. Beneath the Cold Exterior. A month had passed since Lena moved in, and Damien Vance's villa was no longer an empty shell. Damien began to notice the small changes. The scent of toasted bread each morning, Eli's lisping renditions of songs Lena taught him, the sound of laughter echoing from the living room as they played tag. He didn't say it aloud, but those sounds seeped through the cold shell he'd built, making him pause each time he crossed the threshold. He kept his distance, as per their contract, but sometimes he stood silently on the stairs, listening without letting anyone know. One stormy night, as thunder rumbled outside the windows, Lena woke with her body burning. She trembled under the blankets, her forehead slick with sweat, her breath short and ragged. She tried to stand for water, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed to the floor with a loud thud. The noise carried downstairs to where Damien was reviewing documents in his study. He bolted up, pushed open her door, and found her curled on the floor, hair matted with sweat, eyes squeezed shut from fever. Without a word, Damien lifted her onto the bed, his movements swift yet gentle. He grabbed a towel from the bathroom, soaked it in cold water, and placed it on her forehead. He rummaged through the cabinet for medicine, mixed it with warm water, and sat by her bedside in keeping watch. Lena opened her eyes, her voice faint. "You don't have to do this. I can manage." But Damien shook his head, his tone low. "Don't talk. Rest." As he rolled up his sleeve to wring the towel, Lena caught sight of a large scar running down his arm. Deep, jagged, like the mark of a blade from long ago. Her tired eyes widened, and she whispered, "Who did that to you?" Her voice was hoarse but laced with an unhidden curiosity. Damien froze, his hand halting midair. He stared at the scar, his gaze darkening with pain. "An accident," he said curtly, his voice trembling slightly. "From someone I once loved." He offered no more, but the way his fist clenched, the way his eyes avoided hers, told a story longer than he'd admit. He turned away, resuming his task with the towel, trying to bury the emotions rising within. Lena watched him in silence. Though the fever muddled her mind, she glimpsed the vulnerability beneath his tough exterior. She reached out, her trembling fingers brushing lightly against the scar. "It doesn't make you less," she said, her voice soft but sincere. "It just shows you're stronger than you think." Damien flinched, his hands stiffening under her touch. He turned to look at her, his eyes wavering between surprise and confusion. No one had ever said that to him. He wanted to pull away, to rebuild his cold wall, but her touch, gentle, non-judgmental, held him there. "You don't understand," he whispered, his voice rough. "It's not strength, it's failure." Lena shook her head weakly. "No," she said. "Failure is giving up. You didn't do that." She gave a faint smile, her eyes drooping with exhaustion. You're still here. For Eli. Damien didn't reply. He sat there watching her slip back into sleep, her breathing steadying. He didn't leave right away. He stayed through the night, changing the cold towel, checking her temperature, his gaze complex, distant yet close. When morning came and the rain stopped, Lena woke, her fever subsided. Damien was gone, but on the bedside table sat a glass of warm water and the medicine bottle. She glanced at where he'd been, feeling the cold walls, his and perhaps hers, beginning to crack. Chapter 7. The Legal Battle. 3 months had passed since Lena Gray entered the lives of Damien Vance and Eli, transforming the once cold villa into a modest haven filled with the 4-year-old's laughter and the warm meals she prepared. But that peace was only skin deep. Beneath the fragile veneer of happiness, a simmering war for custody of Eli, between Damien and his ex-wife, Clarissa, was escalating, pulling Lena into a whirlwind she'd never imagined. The tension ratcheted up one Saturday afternoon. Lena was on the living room floor, spreading out an old rug to build a tower of colorful wooden blocks with Eli. The boy giggled as he placed a red block on top, his eyes sparkling with delight. Damien had been out since morning, meeting with his lawyer to prepare for the upcoming court hearing, where Clarissa was determined to reclaim Eli at all costs. Lena didn't dwell on it much until the doorbell rang insistently, cutting through Eli's laughter. She stood, wiping her hands on her jeans, and opened the door. Before her stood a tall, slender woman with perfectly waved blonde hair, clad in an expensive gray fur coat. Her sharp blue eyes raked over Lena from head to toe with undisguised contempt. A chill ran down Lena's spine, but she kept her voice steady. "Who are you?" The woman smirked, her thin smile edged with thorns. "I'm Clarissa," she said, her tone sugary yet laced with menace. Without waiting for an invitation, she stepped over the threshold, her high heels clacking on the marble floor. "Eli's mother, and you," she paused, eyeing Lena with a scrutinizing gaze, "are Damien's little newlywed, I presume. Do you think you're worthy of him, you piece of trash?" Lena's fists clenched, a surge of heat rising in her chest. Eli stood behind her, clutching his teddy bear, his wide eyes filled with fear at the unfamiliar voice. Lena turned, kneeling before him, whispering, "Eli, go play in your room for a bit, okay? I'll be up soon." He nodded, his small feet pattering up the stairs, leaving Lena to face Clarissa alone. She straightened, taking a deep breath, her resolute gaze locking onto the woman before her. "I don't need to be worthy of him," she replied, her voice calm but cutting. "I just need to be worthy of Eli. And I'm here for him, not for you or anyone else." Clarissa laughed, the sound echoing through the vast living room, sharp and brittle like breaking glass. "Worthy of Eli?" she repeated, her tone mocking. "You think a few cheap meals and some scribbled drawings make you a mother? I'm his real mother, and I'll take him back. Damien can't keep him forever." She stepped closer, her face inches from Lena's, her breath carrying the scent of expensive perfume. "You're just a puppet, a piece of garbage," he picked up to polish his image. "Get out of here before I make you regret it." Lena didn't flinch, though her heart pounded. She remembered the nights Eli clung to her as he slept, the way he called her Mom in his drowsy voice. "If you really cared about Eli," she said, her voice low but firm, "you wouldn't have left him. I'm not going anywhere. Eli needs me, and I'll be here." Clarissa opened her mouth to retort, but the sound of a car engine rumbled outside. Damien strode in, his eyes darkening as he saw his ex-wife in his home. "Clarissa," he said, his voice icy, stepping between her and Lena. "Get out now, or I'll call security." Clarissa smirked, shooting Lena a final venomous look. "We'll see you in court," she said, then turned on her heel and left, leaving a heavy silence in her wake. Damien turned to Lena, his gaze softening slightly. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone low. Lena nodded, though her hands still trembled. She hadn't expected the confrontation to be so intense. The hearing took place a week later in a small, packed courtroom. The air was stifling, filled with the murmurs of lawyers and court staff buzzing like a disturbed hive. Lena sat in the back row, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, listening to every accusation from Clarissa's side. Her lawyer tore into Damien relentlessly. He was too busy with his company, had no time for Eli, and Lena was merely a gold digger hired to spruce up his case. She's unfit to be a mother, the lawyer declared, his voice steely. Clarissa is the suitable parent. Lena's face burned, as if she'd been stripped bare before the crowd. She wanted to stand and argue back, but Damien rose first. He stepped to the center of the courtroom. His black suit fitted perfectly, his voice ringing out powerfully, silencing the whispers. Lena isn't a gold digger, he said, his gaze sweeping over the judge and jury. She's Eli's real mother. She's with him every day, cooking, teaching him to draw, singing him to sleep. She's given Eli a family, something Clarissa never did. He turned to look at Lena, his eyes softening in a rare moment. I'm not perfect, he continued, his voice lowering. I'm busy, I'm rigid, but Lena's changed everything. She's not here for money. She's here for Eli. I couldn't keep him without her. His words felt like a confession, not just to the court, but to Lena herself. She sat still, a lump rising in her throat. The judge nodded, jotting something down. Clarissa's lawyer tried to counter with old emails and witness statements, but their arguments weakened. After over 2 hours of debate, the judge banged the gavel, ruling to temporarily maintain custody with Damien, pending a final decision next month. Lena exhaled, a mix of relief and exhaustion flooding through her. In the courthouse hallway, as the crowd thinned, Lena stood beside Damien, her hands still clasped to hide their shaking. She felt a hand take hers, Damien's, gentle but firm. Thank you, he said, his voice low and sincere. Today you helped me keep Eli. I couldn't have done it alone. Lena looked up, meeting his eyes, no longer cold but warm and unexpectedly close. Her face flushed, and she quickly pulled her hand back, mumbling, "It's nothing." Damien turned away too, his collar shifting as if to hide a hint of embarrassment. They stood silently in the empty hall, neither saying more. But that brief touch left an imprint Lena couldn't erase. She knew she wasn't just fulfilling a contract anymore. She was becoming part of this family, and Damien, whether he admitted it or not, was starting to open up. Chapter 8. The Secret Beneath the Scar. The night after the court hearing, Damien Vance's villa was cloaked in a rare stillness. Eli slept soundly in his room, his teddy bear tucked snugly in his small arms, his steady breaths audible through the slightly ajar door. Lena Gray sat on the living room sofa, holding a cup of tea that had gone cold, the soft glow of the lamp casting light on her face. She was still thinking about Damien's brief clasp of her hand in the courthouse hallway, a fleeting gesture that left her heart in disarray. She wasn't sure what she felt, only that the boundaries of their deal were starting to blur. Damien descended from upstairs, no longer in his suit but wearing a white shirt with rolled-up sleeves and jeans. He paused at the living room doorway, watching Lena for a moment before stepping in. "Eli's asleep," he said, his voice low. "Thank you for today." He sat in the chair across from her, the distance between them enough to maintain their usual detachment, yet not entirely cold. Lena nodded, setting the cup on the table. "It's nothing. I'm here for Eli." She hesitated, her gaze inadvertently drifting to his arm, where the jagged scar peeked out from beneath his rolled sleeve. She'd seen it before, asked about it briefly, but never heard the full story. Tonight she couldn't hold back. "That scar," she began, her voice soft. "Where did it come from?" Damien stiffened, his eyes darkening. He looked at the scar, his fingers brushing over it as if by habit, then took a deep breath. "Do you really want to know?" he asked, his voice rough. Lena nodded, waiting in silence. He lowered his head, his gaze distant, as if pulling memories from a corner he'd tried to lock away. "It was Clarissa," he started, his voice slow. "I met her 6 years ago at a company gala. It was love at first sight. She was beautiful, smart, and I thought she was the greatest happiness of my life. We fell hard, married within months. Those early days were perfect. We traveled, lived in this house, and I thought I'd found everything I wanted." He paused, a faint smile flickering across his face, only to vanish quickly. Then Eli was born. Lena listened, sensing the shift in his tone. Damien continued, his voice dropping. "Eli was my joy, but to Clarissa, he was a burden. She felt he stole her freedom. Everything changed. By the time he was nearly 1, she wasn't the woman I'd known. She partied, drinking, staying out all night. I begged her to stay home for Eli, but she called him a hindrance, said he kept her from living her life. One night she left, no explanation, leaving Eli crying in his crib. His fists clenched, his eyes brimming with pain. I couldn't accept it. I drove after her, found her on the highway. I shouted, begged her to come back for Eli, for our family. She wouldn't listen. She sped up, I followed, and then my car spun out, crashing into a guardrail. The glass shattered into my arm. I lay there, bleeding, still calling her name. But she didn't stop. She was determined to leave, abandoning me and Eli. Lena felt a lump in her throat, her heart aching at the anguish in his voice. Damien looked up, his eyes weary. Now she's back, demanding to be his mother, he said, his voice trembling. But she doesn't know how hard it was after she left. Eli cried every night, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep well. I didn't know how to replace the motherly love he needed. I tried, but I wasn't enough. He bowed his head, hiding his emotions. But Lena saw his shoulders tremble. She slid closer, gently placing her hand on his, right over the scar. You've done better than you think, she said firmly. Eli didn't just survive, he's happy. You didn't abandon him, even when you were hurting too. Damien looked up, his eyes meeting hers, startled by her touch. He didn't pull away, letting her hand rest there. I'm not a hero, he whispered. I'm just a failure who couldn't hold my family together. Lena shook her head, her fingers tightening slightly. No, she said. I understand. I see myself in Eli. She took a deep breath, her voice rasping as memories flooded back. I grew up in an orphanage. No parents, no one to pick me up on holidays. I cried into my pillow every night, wishing someone would love me. I never got that, so I dreamed of becoming a nurse, to care for others, to make up for that emptiness. She looked at Damien, her eyes glistening but tearless. When I look at Eli, I see me, a kid who needs someone there. You've given him that, even if you think you're not enough. You didn't fail. You're the kind of person I wished for as a child. The air between them grew heavy, yet warmer than ever. Damien stared at her, his eyes wavering between surprise and quiet gratitude. I didn't know what you'd been through, he said, his voice hoarse. But you're here, giving Eli what I can't. You're not just a deal anymore. Lena gave a faint smile, pulling her hand back, though the warmth of the touch lingered. I'm here for Eli, she said. But maybe I'm also finding a place to belong. She stood, picking up the cold tea. It's late. You should rest. Damien nodded, rising with her. As she started up the stairs, he called after her. Lena! She turned, surprised. Thank you, he said, the first time he'd used her name with such clear sincerity. She nodded and continued, her heart beating faster than usual. That night, Lena lay in bed, thinking of Damien's scar, a mark of a love that once meant everything, and the pain of betrayal. She knew she didn't just empathize with Eli. She was starting to understand Damien, and that realization both frightened and drew her closer to him. Are you still following the story? Don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss other meaningful stories. Chapter 9. The Storm from Clarissa. The early morning sunlight slipped through the villa's curtains, illuminating the dining table where Lena was carefully preparing breakfast for Eli. The boy sat across from her, his small hands clumsily sketching a family picture. Dad, Mom, and him, standing under a bright sun. Lena smiled, brushing his hair gently. You drew Mom so beautifully, she said softly, trying to hide the strange warmth blossoming in her chest. This life, though it began as a contract, had become something more real than she'd ever imagined. But that peaceful moment shattered when Damien's phone rang from the living room. He strode in, his face grim, gripping the device tightly. Lena! His voice was low and tense. We've got trouble. Before she could ask, Damien handed her an iPad. A bold headline screamed at her. Damien Vance's new wife, a con artist with a juvenile detention past? The article featured a photo of Lena outside the cafe, her tired post-shift expression twisted into that of a scheming fraud. Below, hundreds of vicious comments piled up. Typical gold digger clinging to a rich guy. Damien's been fooled by her. Lena felt her blood run cold. Who? Who did this? She whispered. Damien didn't answer immediately, but his eyes said it all. Clarissa, his ex-wife, who'd lost the initial custody battle for Eli, had returned with a brutal vengeance. She's spreading lies, Damien said, his voice icy. It's not true, Lena. I had it checked. But the public doesn't care about the truth. Within hours, the storm exploded. Damien's phone buzzed incessantly. Shareholders, reporters, business partners. An emergency meeting was called. Lena stood silently in the corner of the living room, listening as Damien argued over the phone. No, I'm not divorcing her, he snapped at someone on the other end. She's Eli's mother, and she's the one I chose. You want me to step down? Fine. Try forcing me. When he hung up, Lena couldn't meet his eyes. She felt suffocated, as if she were the one pushing Damien to the edge between power and family. Damien, she called softly, maybe I should go. He turned, his deep black eyes boring into her. Go? Go where? Out of this life, Lena said, her voice trembling. I don't want you to lose everything because of me. The company, your reputation, the shareholders. You've built that for years, and me. I'm just a cafe girl, not worth your sacrifice. She lowered her head, tears falling silently to the floor. Eli needs you, not me. Damien stepped forward so quickly she couldn't react. He grabbed her hand, pulling her to face him. You think I'd let you go that easily? His voice was low but resolute, like a vow. We're a family, Lena. Not because of a contract, not because of the court, but because you gave Eli a mother. And me. A reason to keep going. Lena looked up stunned. For the first time, she saw Damien lay his emotions bare. No cold shell, just raw sincerity mixed with desperation. But if I stay, she whispered, Clarissa won't stop. She'll destroy you. Let her try, Damien replied, his grip on her hand unwavering. I'm not afraid of Clarissa. I'm only afraid of losing you and Eli. His words pierced her heart like a blade. She wanted to believe him, to stay, but guilt still held her captive. All day, she quietly packed a few belongings into a bag, planning to leave once Damien put Eli to bed. She scribbled a short note. Thank you for everything. Take good care of Eli. But as her hand touched the doorknob, hurried footsteps echoed behind her. Lena! Damien appeared, his breathing heavy as if he'd raced down the stairs. He saw the bag in her hand, and his eyes darkened. You're really leaving? Without even saying goodbye? Lena choked, unable to look at him. I just want to protect you. Protect me by abandoning me and Eli? Damien stepped closer, his voice a mix of anger and pain. How do you think Eli will feel waking up tomorrow without you? How do you think I'll cope losing someone else? Lena bit her lip, tears streaming faster. I don't deserve this, Damien. I'm not good enough to stand by you. Suddenly, Damien pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could feel his racing heartbeat. Don't you get it, Lena? I don't need you to deserve me. I need you here, with me, with Eli. Clarissa can spread all the lies she wants. I'll face them all, but I can't let you go. She stood frozen in his embrace, his warmth slowly melting the fear in her heart. For the first time, she didn't push him away. For the first time, she wanted to believe she could truly be part of this family. Chapter 10, Protecting Her. That morning, the atmosphere in Damien's villa hung heavy, like the calm before a storm. Lena stood by the window, gazing out at the empty yard blanketed with dry leaves, her hand clutching Eli's wooden necklace. The keepsake from that fateful night she saved Damien. After days of being torn apart by the public over Clarissa's fabricated lies, she felt like a leaf about to be swept away by the wind. But Damien didn't give her time to sink into her thoughts. He strode in, dressed impeccably in a black suit, his eyes sharp as a blade. Get ready, he said curtly. Today this ends. Lena turned bewildered. Ends? What do you mean? Damien didn't answer right away. He simply extended his hand, a rare gesture, but one brimming with resolve. Trust me. She hesitated, then placed her hand in his, feeling the warmth from his calloused palm spread through her. Today she knew would change everything. The press conference room was packed to the brim. Cameras flashed, murmurs rippled through the crowd as Damien stepped onto the podium, facing dozens of curious and judgmental eyes alone. Lena stood backstage, her heart pounding. She didn't know what he planned, but the look in his eyes when they left the house, both cold and tender, kept her riveted. Damien cleared his throat, his steady voice resonating through the microphone. I know you're all here because of the recent scandal, because of the rumors about my wife, Lena Gray. I'll say it plainly, they're all lies. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room like a predator sizing up prey. But I'm not here to explain. I'm here to make one thing clear. I love her. Lena froze, her hand flying to her chest as if to keep her heart from leaping out. The crowd fell silent, waiting. Damien pressed on, his voice growing stronger, more resonant. Family matters more than power. She's the one who saved me from death on a freezing, snowy night. She's my son's mother, the woman I love. If I have to choose between love and power, I choose her. A small sob escaped Lena's throat. She'd never heard Damien speak like this. Not in their contract, not in their brief exchanges. This was the first time he'd publicly called her the woman I love, and it filled her with both joy and fear. Suddenly, a small figure darted out from backstage. Eli, wearing the green sweater Lena had knitted, raced to the podium and clung to Damien's leg. "Don't leave Mom!" he shouted, his clear voice tinged with panic. "I want Mom to stay!" The reporters gasped, cameras swiveling to capture the boy hugging his father, tears streaming down his cheeks. Damien knelt, pulling Eli into his arms, his eyes softening for a moment. He whispered something to the boy, then stood, facing the crowd again. "This is why I choose her," he said, resting a hand on Eli's shoulder. "Not for the company, not for reputation, but for family." The audience stirred. A few scattered claps broke out, swelling into a thunderous applause. The earlier criticism began to fade, replaced by emotion. An elderly shareholder rose from the front row, his voice trembling. "If you're willing to put family above everything, Damien, we still trust you." Others nodded in agreement. The company's shaky footing unexpectedly steadied. Damien held his position, not through power, but through heart. But the story didn't end there. After the press conference, Damien led Lena and Eli home. In the living room, he placed a thick stack of documents on the table. "This is evidence," he said, his voice icy. "Clarissa didn't just spread lies about you. She embezzled millions from the company's charity fund when she was my wife. I've handed it all to the police." Lena stared at him, wide-eyed. "When did you do this?" "Since she dared to touch you," Damien replied, his gaze darkening. "No one hurts my family." Within hours, news broke. Clarissa was arrested at her home, facing charges of defamation and embezzlement. Images of her being led away in handcuffs flooded the headlines, marking the complete downfall of the woman who'd once terrified Lena. That evening, with Eli fast asleep in his room, Lena sat alone on the sofa, holding the marriage contract she and Damien had signed. The dry words now felt like relics of a cold beginning. She stood, walked to the fireplace, and without hesitation, tore the paper in half, tossing it into the flames. The crackling sound of burning paper felt like a release. Damien entered, catching the scene, and froze. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice low. Lena turned, her eyes red but resolute. "I don't need papers," she said, her voice trembling. "I need you to mean it." Damien said nothing, then slowly approached. He knelt before her, pulling a small box from his pocket. When he opened it, a simple yet elegant silver ring gleamed inside. "This time," he said, looking straight into her eyes, "it's because I love you. Lena Gray, will you be my wife? Not for Eli, not for a contract, but for us?" Lena choked up, tears spilling down her cheeks. She nodded, speechless, and let him slip the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had always belonged there. Damien stood, pulling her into his arms, holding her tighter than ever. "Thank you," he whispered in her ear, "for saving me. Not just that night, but every day since." Just then, soft footsteps pattered behind them. Eli, still groggy, appeared at the doorway, clutching his teddy bear. Mom, Dad, he yawned. Take Dad, Mom, so I can have a sister. His innocent words made Damien and Lena burst into laughter, dispelling any lingering tension. Damien scooped Eli up, setting him between them on the sofa. You really want a sister? He asked, feigning seriousness. Yeah, Eli nodded firmly. Mom's a superhero. She can do it. Lena blushed, pinching Eli's cheek lightly. I'll try, okay? She glanced at Damien, catching a rare smile on his lips, a genuine one, free of the cold mask he once wore. That night, with Eli asleep, Lena and Damien sat by the fireplace, the flickering flames dancing across their faces. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder, asking softly, Would you really have given up everything for me? Damien took her hand, pressing it to his chest where his heart beat steadily. No, he replied, his voice gentle yet firm. For us. I didn't lose anything, Lena. I found you, Eli, a real family, something I never dared dream of. Lena smiled, tears falling again, but this time from happiness. She squeezed his hand, feeling the ring on her finger like an eternal promise. Outside, the night wind howled, but inside this home, there was only the warmth of a family that had weathered the storm. Chapter 12, A True Family. 5 winters had passed since Damien knelt by the fireplace to propose to Lena, and the villa's once cold air had long since warmed. The bare walls were now adorned with Eli's scribbled drawings and vibrant family photos brimming with smiles. Clear, joyful laughter rang out from the living room, where Lena played with Joy, their 3-year-old daughter, her curly blonde hair inherited from her mother, and deep black eyes a mirror of her father's. Lena, now a renowned nurse, sat on the rug in her simple white uniform, her eyes alight with happiness. She'd just returned from a shift at the children's hospital, where colleagues affectionately called her the one with healing hands. Her reputation stemmed not only from her exceptional nursing skills, but also from the heart she poured into caring for orphan children. On her days off, she'd visit the orphanage, bringing homemade pastries and sharing tales of the hero in the shadows, a gentler version of Damien she'd once told Eli. Joy, you spilled milk on my shirt again. Lena pretended to frown, but her smile broke through as the chubby little girl threw her arms around her, babbling, Mom's a superhero. She's not afraid of milk. Lena laughed, hugging Joy tightly, savoring the tiny warmth of her daughter like a precious gift. The front door swung open, and Damien stepped in, his black suit pristine, but his eyes radiating relief. Over the past 5 years, he'd continued to run the company with sharp decisiveness, yet he now came home on time, no longer buried in late-night work. The company had weathered its crisis and grown stronger, but Damien often told Lena his greatest success wasn't the numbers on a balance sheet. It was this family. Dad! Joy squealed, wriggling free from Lena to run and hug his leg. He bent down, hoisting her onto his shoulders like a little pony. What did you do to Mom this time, you naughty princess? He teased. I just wanted Mom to turn into a superhero. Joy giggled, wrapping her arms around his head. Lena stood, brushing milk off her shirt, her heart warming at the sight. You're home early today, she said, stepping closer. Nothing's more important than seeing your smile and the kids, Damien replied, setting Joy down and pulling Lena into a quick embrace. He kissed her forehead, a small habit that hadn't faded over the years. Heavy footsteps thundered down the stairs. Eli, now a sturdy boy, bounded in with his school bag slung over his shoulder. Mom, Dad, my teacher praised my essay today, he beamed, pulling a handwritten paper from his bag. I wrote about Mom, how she's a superhero who saves people. Lena took the essay, skimming the innocent yet proud words. My mom is a superhero. She saves people at the hospital. She saved my dad from the snow, and she saved me from being sad. She's the best person in the world. Tears welled up silently, but she wiped them away, smiling at Eli. Thank you, my sweet boy. Damien rested a hand on Eli's shoulder, his eyes gleaming with pride. You wrote it well, but you forgot to mention Dad's a hero too, right? He winked, making Eli laugh loudly. Dad's Mom's hero, and Mom's my superhero. Eli shot back, then ran to hug Lena, forming a warm family circle in the living room. Night fell, And with Joy and Eli asleep in their rooms, Lena and Damien sat by the fireplace, the witness to their life's turning points. The flames crackled, illuminating Damien's face, where the scar on his arm remained, no longer a mark of pain, but part of their happy story. Lena leaned against his shoulder, her hand intertwined with his, feeling the silver ring he'd given her years ago still shining on her finger. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked softly, her voice reflective. "From a cold, snowy night, a contract, to everything we have now?" Damien turned to her, his gaze gentler than ever. He touched her cheek, brushing it lightly as if she were his most treasured thing. "I didn't dare," he admitted. "Back then, I just survived, kept Eli close, and built walls no one could breach. But then you came, Lena. You didn't just save me from the cold. You pulled me out of the darkness in my own soul." Lena smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I never thought I could heal anyone," she said. "I just wanted to help others, the way I wish someone had helped me as a kid. But you and Eli, you gave me a family, a place to belong." Damien leaned down, kissing her lips softly but deeply. When he pulled back, he pressed her hand to his chest, where his heart beat steadily. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice warm like the fire, "for healing my scars inside and out." Lena nestled closer, the heat from him and the fireplace blending together. Outside, the winter wind howled, carrying the chill of the season. But inside this home, there was only love and peace. She closed her eyes, picturing their journey. From a poor cafe girl and a cold CEO with a wounded past to a complete family filled with Eli's and Joy's laughter. It all began on a snowy night, and now they'd found their own light. Thank you for following this heartfelt story of Soul Stories channel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments below. If you believe that true love can withstand all trials and sometimes begins in the simplest of ways, don't forget to hit the like button and share this story with your friends. To never miss out on touching and meaningful stories, subscribe to our channel and help us spread messages of love and warmth to everyone. Let's cherish the beautiful moments of life and love together.